1938 was the year of the Kristallnacht, where almost every synagogue in Germany was set on fire. About 20,000 Jews were arrested on the street. Every German-owned store was ransacked, windows broken. That's why it's known as the Kristallnacht, the night of crystal. The next morning, when my brother Gerhard and I started for school, we had to walk through the streets with all these shards of glass everywhere, and the store owners were made to sweep up, the glass from the sidewalks, and people were gathering around them, mocking them, and it was a horrible experience. You felt totally helpless. I mean, there was nothing you could do. All you really wanted to do was cry. It was so awful to see these poor store owners, had lost everything, and then they had to go out there on their hands and knees and sweep up the broken glass and expose themselves to all that mockery. I mean, it was terrible. It really was. It was just knowing that we were there and we couldn't get out, and God knows what would happen. I mean, every night it was a question of who's going to knock on the door in the middle of the night. It was just sort of a terrible scenario. The British government agreed to allow any number of children between the ages of, I think, 5 and 17 to come in on a temporary basis, as long as they had somebody who would take them in. And they would have to post a guarantee of, I think, £50 or something, that they would not be a burden to the British public or the British government. And the understanding, of course, was this was strictly temporary, and they would all, be going home as soon as this was over, or going to whatever other countries their parents might go to. My mother happened to have a friend in England who gave German lessons to a Scottish lady who lived in London with her husband, and this lady had expressed some interest in maybe taking in a child, and she said, I think I know somebody, and this is how this started. And my parents decided, since I was the older one, probably more vulnerable, they would send me first and my little brother could follow as soon as possible. Well, that never happened, unfortunately. But I was lucky enough to be chosen, and I did go and ended up with a family in England. Later on, when we thought about it, my God, how could my parents have done this? Let their child go to an unknown country, to an unknown, well, they weren't totally unknown. My mother had met the family, but basically unknown, and an unknown fate. And what was to become of them? They had no idea whether we would ever see each other again. I don't remember too much about the actual event of the day. I think both of my parents came to the station with me, but I'm not even certain about that. I know that we had a number of escorts, or chaperones, whatever you want to call it, young people who made sure that we were, well taken care of on the train. They tried to entertain us. They, played the guitar, and we sang songs, and we tried to make the kids feel as happy as possible. And we bonded very quickly, all kids going to this unknown fate. And I still remember we went on the boat. We went from Hamburg to Southampton, so we made a stop in Le Havre in France, and then went to Southampton. So we had a couple of nights actually on the boat. A good family took me in, and we, it was a culture shock, of course, and I had to learn the language, and we had to get to know each other, but we got to be good friends. Being a refugee from Germany, the next thing that happened was the war broke out, and all of us became enemy aliens because we were of German origin, And as soon as I turned 16, I was picked up and sent to a internment camp in England. Which was, never went to a concentration camp, but I went to several internment camps. The British press started asking questions about why are you interning these refugees? So little by little, we were all released, and I came back. I couldn't wait to be 18 so I could join the army. I felt that, I was so patriotic at that time. I felt I had to do my bit. As soon as I was 18, I joined the army, and at first it was the only thing that foreigners could join was the so-called Pioneer Corps, which was sort of a labor battalion. So instead of rifles, we had shovels and pickaxes. But then, about 6 months before D-Day, they opened up the rest of the army to anyone who wanted to. And so most of us, there were actually battalion companies of all German and Austrian refugees with British officers, and then eventually they even had some refugee officers. So I transferred to the Tank Corps and became a radio operator in the Tank Corps and went over to France as that. And then when the war was over, I transferred to military government. I became an interpreter to the regional local governor, and also in charge of the denazification department in the region of Schleswig-Holstein, which is the northern part of Germany, sort of close to Denmark. And so that's where I actually met my parents again. There was a group of fire engines that had been evacuated by the German government just before the end of the war from Berlin to the safety of the country. And these were being returned to Berlin, and I asked if I could be an escort. I had heard that my parents were actually living in Berlin through the Red Cross. And so I went on one of those fire engines and got back into Berlin and found my parents again. I knew where to look for them, and I saw this who looked to me like, very emaciated-looking old man pushing a little wagon with firewood. And that was my dad, who had been to the local park and got some firewood, because they had nobody at that time, not just, being Jewish made no difference anymore. Nobody had anything. Nobody had firewood, nobody had any, heating, cooling, or anything like that. So he had lost a tremendous amount of weight. But we recognized each other, and so we were back together again.
How long were you separated from your parents?
7 years.
Were you reunited with your mother?
Yes, of course. He said, let me go up first and, prepare her for the shock. So, yeah, that was great. My mother was not Jewish, so that helped save the family. Without that, neither my father nor my brother would have survived. My father and brother were periodically pulled into police headquarters and detained for a day or two, but they always came home again, and they were, drafted into these various labor detachments where they would unload coal barges or do whatever. Later on, clear streets from bomb damage, and as the air raids became stronger and stronger, there was more and more of that kind of work to be done. But they did survive. I had a great many uncles, aunts, my grandparents, my grandmother and her family, my father's sister and her children and husband had gone to Amsterdam. As I said earlier, it was one of those places that you could go to, and they were all picked up and sent to Theresienstadt from there. And then her son and husband went on to, the son went to Mauthausen and was killed. And my uncle, I think, was killed in Auschwitz. My grandmother and my aunt and her little daughter survived and came back to Amsterdam after the war.